Hi, welcome to my home and to Lofty Questions. My name is Terry Finnegan Lynch, and I'm so glad that you're here because what we're going to do is learn how to ask for what you want, discover what stands in the way of getting it, and then have some clever ways of actually getting it and keeping it. I wanted to share with you, though, how a lofty question, a big ask, happened a few years ago for me that brought me to this actual show. So I have been on this journey for about 17 years now, from despair of chronic alcoholism to this beautiful, abundant life that I live. And I learned along the way how to ask for what I want. And I also ended up going to nursing school and becoming a cardiology nurse. And that's where this story begins. I was working in a local hospital, and I was seeing the same patients over and over. And although it was wonderful to see them and to help them, they weren't actually getting better. And that became very discouraging over the years. Western medicine treats symptoms and not underlying causes. And I know that if I was only treating the symptoms of my diseases many years ago, I would have never gotten well. I had to get to the root cause. So I was in this conflict between being a nurse and actually fulfilling what I wanted to do to help people. So I finished 3 shifts that week, and I came home. And the next night, there was a blizzard. And it was huge. And I looked out this window, and I watched the snow blanket everything, every branch, every rock. Everything became really quiet, and it was so beautiful. I live right here on the river, and it was just very deep quiet. And I took a breath, and I wondered, maybe this was the moment that I should ask, what do I want? And that is the biggest ask of all, the hardest one, what do I want? But I stood here, and I looked out this beautiful window, looking at this beautiful storm, and asked, what do I want? And I knew I wanted to help people find happiness and health. And I also knew it was going to happen in my nursing career. So then I went a little deeper. I call it my tumble-down theory. Ask until you get to the root. And I said, well, if not nursing, then what? And, a short minute went by, and this idea of becoming a health and life coach crossed my mind. And it felt so right. And I knew that was what it was going to be. That was my answer. And the shift began. And I want to explain why the shift begins. There's 2 ways to ask for something. One is without reservation, and one is with reservation. So learning how to ask with hope and freedom and abundance and curiosity and just a space brings about a really authentic answer. Before I learned how to do that, I would always ask with a reservation. I was programmed to build in doubt and guilt and was I worth it? What would people say? And that restricts the ability for a true answer to come through. And so what we learn here in coaching is how to ask with that complete freedom of opportunity and abundance. And that's what I did, and now I have multiple certifications in health and life coaching. And it was very important to me to share that with the community because a lot of people don't know what this is. And what if you could watch a show and find out how to ask for what you want, find out what stands in the way of getting it, and then some tricks of the trade to actually have it. And that's what we're here to do. So in every episode, I like to refer to a story in my life before I understood how to ask the big question. And this one is about a time when I felt really devastated in trying to stay safe while drinking alcoholically. And this story came to mind after my conversation with my guest, Debbie, who you'll meet in a little while. She was telling me about her life, and a thread that I heard was this feeling of being devastated. And I knew I knew that feeling. And so I wanted to share on this episode what that was like for me, because not only does she feel it, I feel it, but we both can overcome it. So during my active alcoholism, I became unemployable. I was working for a family business and had been drinking all along without event until we grew to a certain success, and then hiding my addiction was impossible. And I was asked to retire to actually get sober in August of '99. Sadly, my former husband had huge issues with anger and is actually considered sociopathic. And the family's answer to that was to send him home to work remotely. So here we are, two highly dysfunctional adults in the same home with our demons, all alone. Well, each morning, the kids would go to school. They would get in their car, grab their book bags, go to school. And I would do the same thing. I would get in my car with a gallon of vodka and drive in circles until they came home. There were no friends in my life at this point. I was hiding from my family. There wasn't any other option to be safe in my mind, and I would drive aimlessly. The ironic thing is that I never had an accident, and I was never even stopped. Maybe there were angels in the car with me and I didn't know it. But I do know the feeling of being devastated, of having nowhere to go, no answer to my problem. But my kids, I'm very proud of the fact that they figured out, mature beyond most adults, that this wasn't their fault and not their problem to solve. And they became amazing adults. And what I did, because it is my problem to solve, was go to AA. And I did get sober, but I didn't stay sober. You see, when you stay in the problem, the pain of being sober is too great. But when you drink, the pain of drinking is too great. So I would waver from one to the next, 3 months at a time, for years. But in that time, I was always hoping for a miracle. And it actually did happen on November 11th, 2002. I woke up drunk, but I knew I didn't want to be this way anymore. And I asked the big ask without reservation, God, you've got this, right? Because I don't. And it happened. The obsession and compulsion to drink vanished. And I've been sober since that day. And the journey of transformation began, the shift occurred, and the result was an abundant life. And so that feeling of devastation drove me to the big ask, which drove me to the solution. And I'm so happy to share that with you here. So the lofty question for today is, what did I learn about myself in the shelter-in-place crisis that I would not have known without the experience? The reason I ask this question is because anytime that we're in a crisis, our thoughts, emotions, and actions escalate. They get really loud. They're very prominent. Just think back when you were in a crisis of any time in your past, how your thoughts and emotions kind of got really ramped up. Well, when we're in the COVID crisis and now moving out of shelter in place to phase 1, 2, and fortunately phase 3, it's still an amplified experience. And each of us are experiencing it differently, but still globally very similar because it's never been done before. So I'm nicknamed me as an adult divorced mother, daughter, grandmother living alone as a sheltered senior, a lexicon of my own making. We also spoke about the quarantines, the teenagers who haven't been able to graduate together or go to proms. We've got the Corona kids who are learning through long-distance learning and playing with siblings instead of friends. You know, COVID parents who are both managing the household for the first time at the same time. So each of these groups of people are in a crisis that is going to create a pattern. And so when we look at the lofty question, what have I learned about myself that I would not have known without shelter in place, we can see it a little bit more clearly what we actually already know about ourselves that isn't really showing up in our ordinary life. So, for example, me, I've had 2 responses to the shelter in place experience as a sheltered senior. One was, at one point in time, I can't bear to be this alone. It is so hard. I was taking care of my grandkids twice a week. I was out with friends, working, doing workshops, and now I'm not. I'm alone all the time. And there was a huge response to that emotionally, where I'm binge watching TV and visiting the refrigerator way too often and doing a lot of self-talk that's really full of doubt. And then there was this other experience that I had from it, which was rest, relax, and renew. You know, I could look at this and say, wow, I've been busy for a very long time. It's good to step back and rest and renew myself. So I had 2 amplified experiences in response to shelter in place. So I'm learning about myself that these things are indicative of how I was responding to my world prior to the crisis, but not really paying attention. So I asked myself about this loneliness. What do I want to do about it? What's my big ask? I'm 62 years old. I live alone. What am I going to do about this? And the answer was, and I have a new friend in my family. I have a proud mama of a puppy. And I gave it a lot of thought, not just a random decision, but I knew that my heart needed some love that I wasn't getting in the steady state of regular life. But in the crisis of COVID, I learned something about myself that I needed to know. I need to take care of this part of me that's very uncared for. And that's what I really want us to each ask ourselves. What is the message that you're getting about your life that only COVID has made you aware of? Only being that shelter in place. Do you like your job? Do you not like your job? How well do you get along with your partner? What do you know more about your kids that you're so grateful to know? What did you learn about yourself that you would not have known without this experience? So we were in a global pause with shelter in place. And with that, it gave us that moment to ask, what are my choices? And from there, choices create change. So the paradigm I'd like to introduce today, also related to the COVID crisis and moving into phase 1, 2, and 3, is the meaning that someone places on an event is more relevant than the event itself. In any crisis, our thoughts, emotions, and actions get louder. They get amplified. The crisis makes them more volatile. And if you think back in any time in your life when there was a crisis, you'll see that pattern. So this is my meaning. I cannot stand to be this alone for this much time. And my actions in response to that was I'm binge watching television, I'm binge visiting the refrigerator, and I'm starting to talk badly to myself about who I am and what I'm doing. But another meaning that I experienced at the same time, in the same event, was much more pleasant. It was rest, relax, and renew. And the meaning behind that was, in my everyday life, I'm running and running and running, and I don't rest, relax, and renew very often. This is a beautiful opportunity for me to invite that purpose into my life. So I had two different meanings to the same event. And when I take the opportunity to pause and look at those, I can understand that pattern that I was so aware of in shelter in place actually exists all the time in my life. I just don't hear it because it's softer. The point of this is that had I not had this crisis where the loneliness was amplified, I may never have actually asked, what more do I want to meet that need? And that's the point of looking at a crisis, looking for the patterns, asking for what you want, taking a moment to pause to figure it out, and then taking an action. So Deb, welcome to Lofty Questions, and thank you so much for joining me and us today. It's truly a very special experience when someone is willing to join us in this quest to ask the big questions, the lofty questions, and who brilliantly applies what it is. And I'm so delighted for the shift that I experienced through your shift of our first conversation and the information we shared and where you are today, which was, 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago? So it's really amazing what's possible in our process of coaching client and asking lofty questions in a very safe place.
Right.
A safe place.
Well, I think the whole thing is COVID is a time where questions get, as you said, amplified. And I think not only that, the questions I had are really deep-seated, because you got to remember the questions I had were a really big deal for different reasons too. When we are talking about death, for billions of years from the beginning of time, death is something that there's been rituals. People always had rituals around death. There's never been a culture that didn't have rituals to take care of the community and people when someone passed away. So where I have had the loss of an aunt, an uncle, animals, and everything, and here I am, okay, move on, and my little girl was like, I don't think so. I was stuck and suffocating, and I'm not a negative person, I'm a very positive person, but I couldn't, I was suffocating. And nobody was hearing me, and everybody kept saying, you're going to be fine, just move on, you're going to be fine, everything's fine. And I love with my whole heart. You haven't known me that long.
No, not long.
But long enough to know that that's who I am.
Yes.
And I just could not do it. I just couldn't. And it's and I had said to you, it's kind of like the story. When you walk down a street and you see a hole, maybe you get smart enough to walk around the hole, not fall in, and maybe you get smart enough to walk on the other side and not, see the hole. But how do you get smart enough to take another route, not even go on that path? Well, I was at the point where I spoke to you that those patterns were so ingrained I couldn't see above the walls. So when I was talking to you, you were just like, well, I'd like to move the pointer a little bit. I don't know if I can move it a lot, but, we'll see what we can do in my show. We'll ask that question. And I'm thinking to myself, blah, 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 blah. I'm so ingrained in that pattern. I'm like, yeah, but how do you make the heart heal? Like, that's impossible. Like, I can't make that heart heal. You're not going to make those people come back and my heads come back. Like, that's impossible. And I'm still in that loop. Blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And how can I ever get out over that hurt? So they were my animals especially were such a big part of my life. And so I felt like I was suffocating. And
when people, as you refer to, say, let go, get over it, move on, right? They're not hearing your pain. They're trying to solve a problem for you without a heart listening ingredient to why this is still here.
Right.
right? So when we talked, and thank you for your vulnerability of that day, there was a story that you told about these sequences of losses and how each one was more devastating than the last, and how cumulatively you had gotten yourself into that constantly seeing the hole on the sidewalk and falling in. And knowing, because you are enlightened and you practice all these beautiful principles of healing and health, it was a foreign experience to be stuck in such a trench of, despair and loneliness and mourning. So darkness, yes, you spoke about that a lot. And when I said, I'd like to move the needle, this show brought in a couple of ingredients that we used in our conversation to help you do that. That being, what did you learn about yourself that you wouldn't have known without the shelter in place? And when we introduced this idea in our conversation, what was so powerful was how loud this all got for you. How big it became, and how there wasn't an answer. And
what screamed to me was, my motto is, when you're in life and there's no answer, everybody in life feels that when something's wrong with them, they're totally broken.
Right.
And there's no one out there that wants anything to do with them, and you're broken, and for your lost soul. And I'm the person that always says to them, stop it. Everybody in life probably has been in that place at one time, and I bet you'll draw that person if you just reach out, and they'll be able to say to you, wait a second, I have experience with that. Because this is a learning lesson. We're here to learn and share. So when you were talking to me, it was like ding, 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 and it made me say, wait a second, you need to remember that, because there's somebody out there who probably has been in your shoes.
Right.
And everybody has to remember that when they are in crisis, they need to remember to reach out, because somebody has been in your shoes, and they, I bet you, will help you. Don't ever think you're broken because somebody out there has been in that bump, and they're going to reach out and help you, and then you can move on with your journey. Don't.
And that's what I think what happened for me listening to you was, to tears. The sadness was palatable. I really hurt for you, and also knew that with the right questions, we could ask, what are you gaining from this despair, this isolation, this not reaching out? And it was what you just described was the answer. By not doing what was good for me, I now know how to invite people not to do what's not good for them. So you have this firsthand experience now.
And I know what people feel like when they don't do
it. And that's not something you had before.
No, I couldn't understand why people wouldn't get help when they needed it, because it was so obvious to me that we're all here to reach out to each other. And it would blow my mind that people would ever think they're broken and not want to reach out. It really would.
And there you were doing that.
Yes.
Doing that same thing.
Right. And it didn't make any sense to me why people would do it.
Right.
And now I can totally relate. And now even more, I'll say to people, please don't ever feel like you shouldn't reach out, because we are all here to reach out and help each other. So it doesn't matter what is wrong with you. Please reach out, because somebody is out there that will and want to help you, make you feel better, because there's nothing wrong with you. You're just stuck in that moment.
Right. So beautifully you described how you had all this loss and you were stuck there. You're in this groove that felt so compelling, yet so unlike you. Darkness and all of this, not...
And deep, and walls like this. So
Yeah.
how do you see above the walls and have to stop that?
So, what's absolutely amazing, and something I experience a lot, is that in our one conversation, you found peace, you were heard, you applied the meaning to what this event meant for you that would be different for everybody else. You can have also multiple meanings for an event, but they're more relevant than the event itself.
Yes.
Right? So you were able to step back and ask, who do I want to be? And because I think that you were heard and felt safe in that expression, that opened up this opportunity to say, what's next? Well, you told me how horrible and unfulfilling and no closure and no love and no connection not having a ritual was taking from you.
Yes.
And when we ask a lofty question like, what did I learn about myself? Rituals are important to me. That was what you learned, although you knew it, because for our entire mankind revolution of evolution, there's been rituals, right? So instead of looking at what you couldn't have, you asked, what can I do? And even though your aunt wouldn't appreciate a rock, so you didn't put one for her, you created a ritual that allowed for all that you felt you were denied, that created the devastating feeling. And so tell us what is the best news of what happened for you.
Well, I have a new service dog coming, probably within a week.
Yes.
I have a new kitten, which is really funny because right after my baby girl passed, I have a really close friend in South Carolina who had kittens, and she said, do you want one? And she drove all the way up from South Carolina, and during the height of COVID, and to my driveway and gave me a kitten.
Yeah. You are, an animal whisperer. Your connection with pets is profound. And you were withdrawing from that part of you because of the pain of losing these animals before.
I was nervous about getting this dog, and I had like ambivalence and
right.
stuff.
Right.
And now I'm just very excited about this dog coming, and I'm ready, and I just can't wait, and I'm just so happy about it. And I know that I will love this dog with my full heart, and I'm so happy.
What I remember you telling me was when you did say yes to yourself, that I want to be who I recognize and
who I remember,
what I'm capable of, living in that hope and happiness, positivity and love. Other things also happened. Not only did you say in your heart yes to a new dog, but the breeder, trainer people called you.
Yeah, and the dog was ready.
And the dog was ready. And I think...
And friends like that I haven't heard from in years, were calling me.
Right.
And
what did your son do?
And my son, was like, come see the baby.
Come see the baby.
And, I wasn't supposed to be able to see it because of COVID.
Right.
And all of a sudden he's like, I'm going to come outside and you can stand on the porch. And, it just, people reached out from all over. It was like the phone hadn't stopped ringing. And I was just, it's just like you turn a leaf and the leaf turns for you.
Exactly.
And so, and I really do believe that does happen in life too. Mm-hmm. And I think because your heart needs to heal, and things when you're ready,
Yeah.
And it does, and it's right, because I was ready.
Thank you so much for going from devastation to abundance, because now there's not a wall between the two. There's a bridge that can go back and forth.
And thank you for having me on your show, and thank you for being able to meet that me, and for allowing you to know the real me.
Thank you for joining us at Lofty Questions. And Deb, thank you so much for being here and being such a great guest. I hope that our show served to move your needle of change. That is the point of the Big Ask. If you have a question you'd like to share, you can send it to loftyquestions@gmail.com. We look forward to our next show and hope you'll join us then. But thank you for being here today, and have a wonderful night.